There was a moment before everything shifted. Before the mission. Before the voices. It started with something that seemed routine. Sitting in the silence of the comms room, I had half an eye on the signal relays while the other scanned the latest report from the Mars outpost. That's what my job had been reduced to over the last few months. Data monitoring, transmission sweeps, and endless diagnostics. The equipment here was top of the line, military grade. Every pulse, every whisper picked up from space filtered through so many layers of analysis. Most of us on the team didn't need to get involved. The artificial intelligence handled it. We were just here as a safety net, in case something unpredictable happened. Which is why the sudden burst of noise startled me. Not because I wasn't used to errant signals, those happened often enough, but because it cut through the usual background with such clarity. A voice. Human. I blinked, my hand hovering over the mute control. I didn't react right away because it didn't register that what I heard could be real. It was coming from Proxima Centauri B, over 4 light-years away. No missions had ever gone there, no colonies established. But that was a human voice, a man's voice, almost frantic, laced with tension, filtered and distorted, but still unmistakably human. Not enough time. The fracture's spreading, can't hold it much longer. I froze. The signal cracked and broke apart, the static swallowing the rest of the transmission. I immediately ran a full-spectrum analysis, but the results were inconclusive. There was no source, no trajectory, nothing to suggest how a signal like that could originate from Proxima B, or anywhere nearby. What the hell? I muttered, already pulling up every relay feed I could think of. The array was designed to pick up signals from the deepest parts of space. That was why I was stationed here on the edge of our solar system. I'd been told this assignment would be boring, low risk, perfect for someone like me who preferred precision over excitement. Another burst of static erupted from the speakers. Losing people, they're just gone. No trace. My pulse quickened as I cross-checked the audio once again, hoping this was a trick of the relays, some bizarre electromagnetic interference. But no. The signal was undeniably real, and it was coming from Proxima Centauri B. I patched the audio through to the operations center. Lieutenant Sutton responded with a grunt as she scanned the data from her own terminal. "What have you got, Monroe?" Her voice was a flat monotone, the kind of response you'd expect from someone used to handling anomalies and not getting excited about them. I was starting to think that might be a mistake. "Human voices," I said. "Multiple transmissions coming through, all directed at us. They're coming from Proxima Centauri B." There was a pause, a long silence. Even through the static, I could hear Sutton's breath hitch slightly. "That's not possible." "I know." There was a click as she sent the data upstream, probably to the brass back on Earth. I leaned back, watching the spectral readout of the signal pulse on the screen in front of me. A signal from another star system. And not just any signal. Human voices. "Run diagnostics," Sutton said, her voice tighter now. "Find the source, scrub the relays, see if this is some sort of artifact or error." I didn't need to be told twice. For the next 30 minutes, I combed through every data point, every system function, even rerouted power to scrub through interference. But it all came back clean. The voices were still there, fragmented now, pieces of conversation that sounded like they were coming from a war zone. There were screams, background chatter, military codes I didn't recognize. "Everything's unraveling. We need to stabilize before it pulls us all under. One timeline, only one can..." The voices stopped, and the comms room fell into silence. I rubbed my face, suddenly feeling the hours spent staring at screens and managing data. The silence didn't last long. Sutton's voice came through again, but this time she wasn't calm. "Orders just came through from command. Pack your gear, Monroe. We're going in." I blinked. "Going in?" She sighed, a brief moment where I caught the edge of her own disbelief. "That signal? It's been confirmed. Command wants a recon team dispatched to Proxima Centauri B to investigate. I sat there for a second, feeling the weight of the words sink in. Proxima Centauri B recon mission. I'd read the briefings on that planet. Hostile conditions, zero infrastructure, no known life. And now we were supposed to land there, boots on the ground, and investigate a human signal that shouldn't exist. "What the hell are we dealing with, Sutton?" I asked, standing and grabbing my gear pack off the floor. I wasn't expecting an answer, but I needed to say something to cut through the tension building in my chest. "I don't know," she replied, "and that's why they're sending us." A hollow feeling opened in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't some fluke signal or a system malfunction. Something was out there. Something, or someone, was sending messages from a planet that no one had ever set foot on. And now Command was sending us to find out who or what was waiting for us on Proxima Centauri B. I turned to leave, thinking about preparations. Whatever was waiting on that planet, it wasn't going to be anything good. The first thing I noticed when I came out of stasis was the cold. Cryogenic systems aren't designed for comfort. They're designed for function, for keeping your body alive while the rest of the universe moves on without you. The disorientation came next. I couldn't tell how long it had been since we'd left, only that we were supposed to be near Proxima Centauri B. I forced myself upright in the stasis pod, my limbs slow and clumsy. The world was blurry, everything coming into focus as my vision adjusted. The ship hummed around me, the soft mechanical sounds of life support systems, energy regulation units, and the AI monitoring our journey. "Captain Monroe, vital signs are within acceptable parameters. Re-entry complete." I blinked as the AI's voice came over the intercom, guiding us back into the mission with none of the concern or hesitation a human would feel. I wasn't quite there yet, my mind lagging behind my body, but I forced myself to focus. We were close to Proxima now. That was the reason we'd come out of stasis. Around me, the other pods opened as the rest of my team began to stir. Sutton was the first to step out, rubbing her arms, clearly feeling the same deep cold that penetrated my muscles. "Get your gear on," I said, my voice rough and low. It felt strange to speak after so long in the quiet of cryosleep. "We'll need to run a full systems check before we land." She nodded, her expression tight, but she didn't argue. She knew the drill. I was in command out here. On the ground, this mission was mine. The others were already following suit, unsteady but quick to fall back into routine. We'd trained for this, after all. A long mission like this one required a certain level of detachment, a way of compartmentalizing the time we'd lost, the distance between us and Earth. It was just another mission. At least, that's what we had to tell ourselves. The suit felt heavy, the atmospheric armor layered with enough tech to keep us alive on a planet that shouldn't be able to support human life. There was no water, no breathable air, and temperatures dropped to extremes no human could survive. But that signal we'd received told a different story. The colony we were about to land near wasn't supposed to exist. By the time I finished securing the helmet and checking the seals, the others were lined up in front of the control console, their suits activated, life support systems running in low power mode for the descent. "AI status report," I said, sliding into the command chair. "All systems nominal. Descent trajectory locked. Estimated time to surface, 23 minutes. I scanned the data streaming across the console. Atmospheric readings, gravitational pull, radiation levels. Everything seemed normal enough. Or as normal as things could be for a planet that shouldn't be home to human life. "All right, let's make this quick. Sutton, you're on navigation. Shaw, gear inventory. Reed, check comms." They moved into action, shaking off the remnants of cryosleep, the haze fading as the ship began to rumble beneath us, signaling the start of atmospheric entry. The thrum of the engines kicked in, and I felt the slight pull of gravity pressing me against the seat. A low vibration built in the walls, the ship shifting as it prepared for the descent through Proxima's atmosphere. I kept my eyes on the display, watching the planet grow larger. From this distance, it didn't look like much, just another ball of rock and ice, the surface pocked with craters, dust storms swirling in slow motion across the horizon. It looked dead, and if I didn't know any better, I would have said that's exactly what it was. Sutton's voice cut through the silence. We're approaching visual range of the surface. Coordinates are stable. I tapped a few commands into the console, bringing up the external cameras. As we broke through the upper layers of Proxima's atmosphere, the haze began to clear, revealing the planet below in stark detail. My breath caught in my throat. There it was. The colony. It shouldn't have been there. It couldn't have been there. But it was. A network of structures and domes glinting faintly under the weak light of Proxima's distant star. I could make out buildings, roads, even the outlines of what looked like some kind of transport system. But none of it made sense. The architecture was human, familiar enough to recognize, yet there was something about the layout, the precision that felt off. "What in the universe?" Reed muttered from his station. How long has that been there?" "No record of any human colony in this sector," Shaw added, her fingers tapping furiously at her console. "Nothing even close. We would have known." But the colony was real, tangible, and we were about to land right in the middle of it. I leaned forward, eyes locked on the structures below as the ship descended. Tension filled the cockpit, each of us grappling with what we were witnessing, knowing full well that we were stepping into the unknown. There was no protocol for this. No mission briefing could have prepared us for the possibility that humanity had somehow established a foothold on Proxima Centauri B without leaving a trace in our timeline. The AI's voice broke the silence again. "Approaching landing zone. Initializing atmospheric stabilization protocols." I checked my suit's readings, the HUD confirming everything was in order. The rest of the team did the same, checking their systems, weapons, and gear, preparing for what came next. We had no idea what we were about to walk into. Sutton's voice was steady, but I could hear the undercurrent of nerves. "Touchdown in 30 seconds. I gripped the armrests as the ship gave a final lurch, engines kicking into reverse to slow our descent. The ship touched down with a soft thud, the mechanical whir of landing gear stabilizing us against the rocky ground. For a moment, none of us moved. We just sat there, staring out at the colony, waiting for something to happen. "All right," I said. "Time to move." The door opened, revealing a narrow passage leading into the colony. I moved first, my boots making a dull thud on the metal floor as I adjusted the weight of my pack. The others followed in a line behind me, quiet and focused. We'd done this 1,000 times before on other worlds, but the stakes here felt different. There was no record of any human presence this far from Earth. And yet, here we were, about to walk into a fully operational colony. The moment we passed through the airlock and into the colony proper, the shift was immediate. The cold air of the ship gave way to a warmer, filtered atmosphere. I pulled off my helmet, the smell of recycled air filling my lungs. The suit's HUD flashed briefly, signaling that the external environment was now stable. We were inside a controlled zone, one that seemed to sustain human life without the need for suits. I scanned the room we'd entered, functional, Spartan, and well-maintained. It could have been any number of outposts I'd seen over the years, except for one glaring detail. This place shouldn't exist. Sutton was the first to speak, tugging off her helmet. "Looks like a standard colony setup. Who the hell built all this?" The colony's architecture was Earth-like in design, but with subtle differences. It was practical, with little ornamentation or unnecessary detail, but everything had a polished look that hinted at advanced technology beyond our own capabilities. Whoever had built this place had done so with precision and efficiency, and it had been here for a while. "Let's move," I said, motioning for the others to follow. The hall led us further into the colony. The deeper we went, the more signs of life became apparent. Small details, like scuff marks on the floor and smudged fingerprints on the walls. The kind of things you didn't notice when you'd lived in a place for a long time. This colony wasn't new, and it hadn't been abandoned. People were living here. Further ahead, the hallway opened into a larger space, what looked like a central hub of some kind. I scanned the room, taking in the rows of control panels and monitoring stations. At the far end, a wide window gave us our first clear view of the outside. Beyond the reinforced glass, I could see the desolate expanse extending into the horizon. Rugged mountains rose in the background, their summits shrouded in a constant twilight mist. The sky was a pale blue, the thin atmosphere barely holding on to any warmth. The land was scarred with craters, dust storms swirling slowly across the surface. It was every bit as hostile as we'd expected. And yet right here, humans were thriving. The first sign of the colonists came when the door at the far end of the room opened. A group of 6 or 7 people stepped through, dressed in simple, utilitarian clothing. They looked like ordinary citizens, workers, engineers, folks you'd find in any town on Earth. Yet, they carried themselves with intent, their expressions calm, almost indifferent to our presence. One of them, a man in his early 40s, approached. His hair was cropped short, and his face was lined with age and hard work. He didn't seem surprised to see us, which was unsettling enough on its own. "Welcome," he said, his voice measured. "You must be the team from Earth." I glanced at Sutton, then back at the man. "We weren't expecting, well, this." I gestured vaguely to the colony around us. "Who are you?" "My name is Lorne," he replied, nodding slightly. "I'm the acting administrator here." "We picked up your transmissions," I said. "There were no records of a colony here. No missions sent this far. How long have you been here?" Lorne exchanged a glance with one of the other colonists before answering. "That's a complicated question. This colony has been operational for over 30 years, but in a way we've always been here." "Always?" Sutton frowned, clearly not liking the sound of that. Lorne smiled, a small, knowing smile that did nothing to ease the tension building in my chest. "We're a long way from Earth, Captain. Things don't always work the same way out here." I wasn't buying it. 30 years, there were no records of any interstellar missions predating our own. Yet here they were, living, breathing proof that somehow they'd done it. "We're here to investigate," I said, my tone firmer now. "We need to understand how you've been able to survive on this planet. Our data shows Proxima Centauri B as completely inhospitable." "Outside the colony, yes," Lorne agreed, gesturing to the view beyond the window. "The planet's natural atmosphere is toxic. We've built this place to sustain us. Advanced filtration systems, atmospheric control, and a power grid that runs on energy sources unique to this system. It's not perfect, but it's home." It was all too neat, too easy. But the facts were undeniable. The colony was real and it was operational. The people here were alive, thriving even, in conditions that should have killed them. Something wasn't adding up. Sutton approached, her curiosity getting the better of her. "How did you establish contact? How did we receive your signal?" Lorne's expression darkened slightly. "That wasn't intentional. The transmission you intercepted was a mistake. We've been careful to avoid drawing attention, but it seems our systems malfunctioned. The signal you heard wasn't meant for your ears." I narrowed my eyes. So what was it, a distress call? A warning? Lorne didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted to the others in the room, his face hardening into something more serious. "We didn't call for help, Captain, and we're not in any immediate danger. But there are things here, things you don't understand." My gut twisted at his words. There was something behind them, a quiet threat buried beneath his calm demeanor. Whatever was going on in this colony, it wasn't as simple as surviving on an inhospitable planet. There were layers here, secrets they weren't telling us. "We have orders to investigate. We're not going anywhere until we've completed our mission." Lorne sighed, as if he'd expected that answer. "I understand. But be careful, Captain. There are forces at work here that don't follow the rules you're used to." He stepped aside, motioning for us to follow him. "Come, I'll show you what you've come to see." The quiet settled in as we followed Lorne deeper into the colony. The corridor we walked through was wider now, lined with dim, recessed lights. The place felt lived in, like any other human settlement, yet there was an unsettling stillness to it. No conversations, no movement, no sense of life beyond the small group we'd seen. It didn't feel right. For a colony that had supposedly existed for 30 years, it seemed abandoned. "Where is everyone?" Sutton muttered. Lorne didn't slow down or turn to acknowledge her question. He just kept walking, his pace steady, eyes focused ahead. "The colony is self-sustaining," he said. "Most of the population is in their designated sectors. We've adapted to the planet's cycles. There's no need for constant activity like you're used to on Earth." I didn't like his answer. It was too vague, too rehearsed. Everything about this place felt controlled, like they were hiding something just beneath the surface. My gut told me to dig deeper, but we weren't in a position to press too hard yet. Not until we had a better understanding of what was really going on. We turned another corner, and the corridor opened into a larger space, what looked like a research facility. Large observation windows framed the space, revealing a series of interconnected labs filled with equipment I didn't recognize. Machines whirred and beeped softly in the background, their functions unclear, but I could see scientists working inside. They moved methodically, barely acknowledging our presence as they monitored screens and adjusted settings on their consoles. "This is where we study the anomalies," Lorne said, stopping in front of one of the large observation windows. The labs beyond were filled with people, machines humming, data flowing across holographic displays. I approached the glass, taking in the equipment and data. This wasn't simply a colony, it operated as a research facility, and the focus of their study wasn't survival on Proxima Centauri B. It was something far more dangerous. Whatever they were working on was tied directly to the planet, to the fabric of time and space. Shaw appeared beside me, her eyes narrowing as she examined the readouts. "This isn't just atmospheric regulation," she said, her voice tense. "They're not just maintaining life here, they're manipulating it." Lorne nodded, his expression calm, but his eyes hard. "Proxima Centauri B sits at a point of instability between universes. The anomalies here aren't natural. They're the result of our worlds overlapping, timelines bleeding into one another. We didn't come from your Earth. We came from a different version of it, and this planet is the only thing keeping us from being erased." My stomach twisted at his words. Different Earth, universes colliding. I had expected something beyond our understanding, but this wasn't an anomaly, this was a cosmic disaster in the making. "You're from a different timeline?" Sutton's voice cut through the tension, her disbelief obvious. "How is that even possible?" Lorne's eyes flicked toward her, his mouth forming a tight, humorless smile. "Possible or not, here we are. Our Earth developed faster than yours, pushed beyond its limits. Interstellar travel became our only option for survival. Proxima was supposed to be our refuge. But when we arrived, the anomalies here, they were already in motion. Two timelines converging, two versions of reality trying to occupy the same space. I glanced at the scientists in the lab, watching them as they worked. They were fighting the anomalies, keeping them contained. This colony wasn't simply existing alongside us. It was being slowly swallowed by the convergence of two universes. We've done what we can to stabilize the rifts, Lorne continued, his voice steady, but there was something underneath it, a quiet urgency. The technology we've developed allows us to manage the fluctuations, to protect ourselves from the worst effects of the anomalies. But it's getting worse. The fractures are becoming more frequent, more violent, and there's only so much we can do. Everything we'd seen so far, the colony, the signals, the anomalies, it all pointed to one inevitable truth. This planet couldn't sustain both realities. One would have to go. And the question now was, which one? Sutton crossed her arms, her skepticism giving way to concern. If this is happening, why didn't you reach out sooner? Why didn't you call for help when the anomalies started? Lorne hesitated, his gaze dropping for a moment before he answered. We've managed the anomalies for years. We thought we could handle it ourselves. Involving more people, more variables would only accelerate the collapse. But recently, the fluctuations have become too unstable. There's no way to control it now. It's why you received our signal. The transmission was meant for internal systems, a call to prepare for what's coming. But somehow the anomalies breached our communications. You weren't supposed to know about us. We were trying to prevent a conflict. But now... He trailed off, leaving the words unsaid. I stepped back, feeling his words sink in. This wasn't an investigation anymore. We were part of the problem now, part of the convergence that was tearing two realities apart. And if what Lorne was saying was true, we might be the ones who didn't survive. How bad are the anomalies? I asked. Lorne's smile faded, replaced by a grim expression. They're growing stronger. We've already lost parts of the colony to time fractures, places where the past, present and future all collide. People get trapped in loops, reliving the same moments over and over. Others disappear entirely, erased from existence as if they never were. Time fractures, people vanishing. It sounded like something out of a nightmare, but the fear in Lorne's voice was real. We've made sacrifices to keep the colony stable, Lorne continued, his voice lower now. But the anomalies are becoming too powerful. There's no stopping them anymore. Our only chance is the prototype we've developed. It's supposed to separate the timelines to save both realities. How long do we have? I asked, already knowing I wasn't going to like the answer. Days, maybe less. The fractures are spreading. If we don't activate the machine soon, both timelines will collapse. Days. Time was slipping away, and if this prototype didn't work, our entire universe could vanish, swallowed by the anomalies. Show us everything, I said, my voice hardening. Lorne nodded, motioning for us to follow him deeper into the facility. Very well. We moved as one unit, Sutton, Shaw, Reed and I, trailing behind Lorne and the other scientists. Every second felt like we were walking closer to an edge, one we couldn't come back from. The corridor opened up into a massive room, larger than anything we'd seen in the colony so far. The heart of the facility. Machines hummed in the background, massive structures reaching from floor to ceiling, encased in glass and steel. This is the core, Lorne said, his voice unnervingly calm. It's where we've been stabilizing the anomalies, and where we'll make the final push to save both our timelines. Sutton moved to one of the consoles, brushing over the controls, eyes narrowing as she tried to decipher the data. This tech is beyond anything we've seen. How did you even develop this? Lorne didn't look at her, his gaze focused ahead. Necessity is a powerful motivator. We've had years to figure this out. I caught the edge in his tone, the unspoken history in his words. How much time had really passed here? Time seemed to be twisting, slipping between fingers like sand. They weren't telling us everything, and I had the sinking feeling we'd already crossed a line. We're close, Lorne continued. We've managed to stabilize parts of the fracture, but to save both universes, we need to enact a final sequence. The rift will merge momentarily, and then we can lock it in place. Shaw's eyes darted across the screen. Merge? That's impossible. The convergence would tear both timelines apart if it wasn't controlled properly. Lorne turned to face us, his calm mask slipping for just a moment. It's dangerous, yes, but we've calculated the risks. It's the only way. Reed shifted beside me, his discomfort clear. Calculated or not, you don't seem too worried. You're sure this will save both? Lorne paused, and for the briefest second, I saw the truth. The hesitation, the crack in his carefully constructed facade. I opened my mouth to speak, but the moment passed as he gestured to the scientists. Start the sequence, Lorne said, his voice firm. Sutton, Reed and Shaw exchanged uneasy glances, but there was no stopping now. The room buzzed with activity, lights flashing on the consoles, and the machines around us whirred to life. I watched the display on the main screen, unfamiliar symbols flashing, counting down. The time for questions had passed. We were committed. A massive pulse of energy shot through the room, shaking the walls. I stumbled, grabbing onto the railing to steady myself. The air crackled with static, and the machines screamed as they strained against the rift, tearing itself open. "We need to stop this!" I shouted over the noise. "This isn't stabilizing anything!" Lorne didn't respond. He stood at the center of the chaos, his face expressionless, as if he'd expected this. The ground trembled beneath our feet, and I could feel the rift. It wasn't stabilizing, it was breaking. The walls of reality were collapsing, the boundaries between our world and theirs shattering. The core pulsed again, and everything went still. I looked around, disoriented, as if time itself had slowed to a crawl. I turned to Lorne, and the truth finally hit me. You never meant to save both timelines, did you?" Lorne's eyes met mine, and this time he didn't hide it. "There was no way to save both. One timeline had to survive, and we chose ours. I'm sorry, Captain, but you were never going to make it." The room seemed to tilt. I took a step back, disbelief mixing with anger. Reed advanced swiftly, rage boiling over. "You lying bastard! You knew this from the start!" Lorne didn't flinch. "We had to ensure our survival. There was no way to explain it to you without risking everything. I wish there had been another way." Sutton was as pale as a ghost. "So what happens now? Our timeline, it's gone?" Lorne's gaze softened, his calm demeanor holding steady. "Your timeline will collapse. It's already happening. But we will survive, and so will you. You're still here, and we'll help you adapt." The words barely registered. Our Earth, our people, our history, all gone. "You could have told us. You could have given us a choice." "There was no choice," Lorne said quietly. "We had to survive. And now, so do you." I felt it then, a shift in the air, a final break. My world was gone, and there was no going back. "What are our choices now?" I asked. Lorne looked at me, and I saw sympathy in his eyes. "You can stay here at the colony, or you can return to Earth. Not your Earth, but ours. You'll have a place there, a chance to build new lives." The thought of staying here, of living among the very people who had erased our world, it was unbearable. But what was waiting for us on their Earth? A life that wasn't ours. I turned to the others, their faces showing grief and anger, but I saw the decision in their eyes before they spoke. We couldn't stay here. Not in this place, not among these people. The colony wasn't home. "We'll go to Earth. We'll take our chances there." Lorne nodded once, but there was no satisfaction in his expression. Just quiet acceptance. The scientists stood silent, their work complete, as we turned away from the core, from the rift, from everything that had been taken from us. We left the facility without another word, the emptiness settling in, a cold reminder that our fight had never been about winning. It had always been about surviving. But whose survival mattered in the end? The shuttle touched down on Earth, but it didn't feel like coming home. The gravity felt right, the air crisp with the familiar scent of pine and damp soil. But it wasn't our Earth. It was an imitation, close enough to look like home, but different in ways that troubled me. I stood at the edge of the ramp, my boots pressing into the soil. I stared at the sky. Same blue, same sun, but it felt as if the entire planet was waiting for us to accept a life that wasn't ours. Behind me, Sutton, Reed and Shaw disembarked in silence. None of us had spoken much since that day. We were alive, but our world was gone, our timeline erased, leaving us to live in the skeleton of a reality that didn't belong to us. Sutton stepped up beside me, her hands in her pockets as she stared at the distant horizon. "It feels like Earth," she said softly. "But it's not, is it?" "No," I replied, my voice rough. "It's not." She nodded once, but there was no argument, no fight left in her. We had all known these were our only options. Stay at the colony, forever reminded of the betrayal, or come here and try to build something out of the ashes. This Earth was as close to home as we were going to get. We walked in silence for hours, until the sounds of the city began to hum in the distance. The streets were crowded, bustling with life, with people who looked like the ones we'd left behind. Same faces, same clothes, same hurried pace of life, but these weren't our people. They had their own history, their own stories. We were outsiders here, ghosts walking among the living. Reed had barely spoken since we landed, his expression hard as he stared at the people passing by. It's like nothing ever happened here. They don't even know what we gave up. No, I said quietly. They don't. Shaw glanced around, her eyes flicking over the small differences, signs written in languages that hadn't existed in our world, subtle shifts in architecture, small cultural details that were just different enough to remind us we didn't belong. How are we supposed to live here? She asked. This place. It's not ours. The thought tormented me as I looked around. It was a world so familiar it hurt to look at. But there was no place for us in it. We were relics of a timeline that had been erased, walking among people who would never know the sacrifice we made, who couldn't understand the weight we carried. We found places to stay, new identities, new jobs. The people here welcomed us, oblivious to the truth, offering us a fresh start as if it could somehow erase the pain of what we'd lost. Sutton tried to keep busy, throwing herself into work, her military training still sharp as ever. Shaw took to the research labs, trying to find some sense of purpose in a world that wasn't hers. Reed, he kept to himself, rarely speaking, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. And then there was me. I stood on the edge of this new world, watching from a distance, never quite able to connect. The sky was the same, the streets were the same, but I felt like I was walking through a dream, a distorted reflection of a life that was no longer mine. I thought about the people we left behind, the ones who didn't survive, the ones who were erased along with our world. I wondered if they would have chosen differently, if they would have fought harder. But it was too late for those questions now. Sometimes, late at night, when the city was quiet and the streets empty, I'd find myself staring up at the stars, searching for something familiar. But even the constellations were different here. I wondered if our Earth even existed out there anymore, or if it had been wiped from the universe completely, leaving only this shadow of a reality. The others tried to move on, to find a way to live in this new world. But for me, the weight of what we'd lost was too much to bear. I found myself walking the streets aimlessly, trying to forget, but the memories followed me everywhere. The fractures, the betrayal, the realization that we were nothing more than pawns in a game we never stood a chance of winning. One night, I found myself standing at the edge of a cliff, staring out at the ocean. The waves crashed against the rocks, the sound almost soothing in its constancy. But even the ocean didn't feel right. Its rhythm was off, its color a shade too dark. Everything about this world was a reminder of what we'd lost. I closed my eyes and let the wind whip against my face, thinking about the last words Lorne had said to me. We had to survive, and now so do you. But what did survival mean if everything you knew was gone? What did it mean to go on living when your world had been erased, when the people you loved were nothing more than a memory? I opened my eyes and took a deep breath. The sky was dark, the stars faint, and for the first time since we arrived, I felt the weight lift just a little. We were alive, and that had to mean something. Maybe we'd never feel at home here, but we were still breathing, still walking, still able to make choices. Maybe that was all survival ever really was.